We're the blanched almonds, aka J to the fourth power.
I'm John.
I'm Jamie.
I'm Jackson.
I'm Josh.
And we're going to be talking about the Northern Arab Sudanese people. First, I'm going to be talking about Sudanese clothing and food. So with clothing, there's kind of two extremes. On one hand, some people just wear Western attire like what we would wear. But on the other hand, a lot of people wear traditional Sudanese clothes. One example of a traditional Sudanese garment is the jalabiya. The jalabiya is a loose-fitting, long-sleeved, collarless, ankle-length garment that is usually accompanied by a large scarf. Some of the foods that they use are spices such as saffron, nutmeg, cinnamon, ginger, and cloves, or sweet pastries and other baked foods. And a lot of those were brought in from surrounding countries into the north, and that's how they got into their culture. So a typical day in the lives of Sudanese people would start with coffee or tea. They are really big on a cup of tea or coffee to involve hospitality and get to know people. It's a lot of the way that they spend time together. And so in our interview, we interviewed a man named Jamie who did the Journeyman program and lived in Sudan for 2 years. He said that during that time, he would have breakfast with the same men every morning, and they would stay for about 4 hours just drinking coffee and talking. So that shows how it's kind of a leisurely, fun activity to start the day. So after that, men and women really lead separate lives. Men usually gather in clubs, and women would gather in the homes. Extended families are a big deal. So extended families will either live very close, or they'll all live in the same home. So women they work in the fields, and they also are responsible for taking care of the children. And they have been known to even carry infants with them while working. Boys and girls are also raised separately and even have separate schools. The schools that these children go to are Islamic schools called Qawala. And these schools teach them principles at a very young age. Also, at every event and at every meal, women will actually have to eat after men, and they can't go before them. So there's a big emphasis on women following after the men. Some cultural taboos that you might not want to do if you're in Sudan or you're visiting are, first of all, Sudanese people have arranged marriages. So don't try to matchmake anyone while you're there. Any of your Sudanese friends you think might be a good fit, because that could be offensive. Also, they will have you eat from a common serving bowl. So be prepared to do that and not be grossed out by having to eat from the same bowl. That's normal. Also, you use your right hand to eat food, not utensils. Many times when you're brought into someone's home, you will sit on pillows around a low table for your meal. And they will pass around a towel and a pitcher of water for you to wash your hands before the meal. So be ready for that when it happens. The two main things that are bad for you to do if you're there are more towards the men. And if you're a man, it is bad for you to inquire about your Sudanese host, his wife. You don't need to ask him about his wife. And also, you need to check to make sure your wife is invited to wherever you're going before you bring her. Because many places, women are not welcome, and it would be looked down upon if you brought your wife.
Alright, so I will be talking about what people do for entertainment, what the language is, and a few examples, and a narrative summary of the group's history. So most of the time what people will do, it's actually going to be separated by men and women. The men typically are the ones to go out more than the women will, because the women will often gather in the homes or just kind of group together privately. The men, however, will go play soccer outside, or they'll go play cards and have tea or coffee. And if you're an American visiting, or if you're an American living in Sudan, they'll go to the local nightclubs, and most of the time people rent those out. So the language. The language is kind of similar to Spanish in some forms, because it varies on some of the verbs that you say towards women or towards men. So this is a greeting. It means, hello, how are you? And it is yomak kan kaf, or yomik kan kaf. And yeah, so another greeting is Tayeb Masalama. And also similarly in Spanish, some of these don't actually have feminine or masculine forms. So this one means, okay, goodbye. Now, the narrative summary. After the death of the Prophet Muhammad, the two denominations that we have now in Islam are the Sunni and the Shiite. And the group that we're talking about are the Shiite, or not the Shiite, but the Sunni. And the Sunni accepted Abu Bakr as the first caliph in order to differentiate between the two sects. And the Shiite rejected Abu Bakr's authority in favor of Ali, who the Sunnis accepted as the fourth caliph rather than the first. One common mistake is to assume that the Sunni is the normative or the original denomination of Islam. They actually split after Muhammad died. Now, the way you can think of this, the Sunni are more like the Orthodox form of Islam, and the Shiite are more like the Catholics that we have.
Alright, so I'm going to be talking about the Northern Sudanese beliefs about the world around them, the different attitudes they have than our culture, and then the core values they have in their culture. So beliefs about the world. They're largely Muslim, and even though they're Muslim, a lot of their Islam is more animistic. So like, if something bad happens to their crops, they appeal to Allah or the Quran for why it happened. So that has a large effect on the world around them, how they view it. And then you can tell this in like, the men go to the mosque 5 times a day to pray, and then the women will stay at home and do like their own home group studies. So it'd be like a Christian Bible study small group, but for like the Quran. So different attitudes they have in our culture. There's a lot actually. First of all, they believe in polygamy, so the men are able to have up to 4 wives. I know, that's pretty different. And so there are several subjects on which they view their culture through, and these are inheritance, taxation, war regulations, authoritative roles, family, and marriage. And so for these certain categories, they'll search the Quran for the meaning and for the structure in their culture, whereas we might like look for the Bible or just have a relativist view on it. Boys are clearly elevated above girls in their society. And while there might not be an equality between boys and girls in America, at least we strive for it. For them, it's just like obvious that boys aren't going to equal girls. So like the boys will get pampered when they're growing up, and the girls will just get the necessities of life. So the boys are taught to respect the older males, and then the girls are taught to obey their future husbands. So there's no like emphasis on respecting any women for the society. That's also different than Western societies. Teens are not permitted to communicate with the opposite sex until after they're married. So that's definitely different than American societies. So for their values, they have 4 core values, and they're honor, loyalty, hostility, and hospitality. And while it might seem the last 2 are contradicting, it's actually more like when they first get an impression of a people group or a person, they're either extremely hospitable or they're hostile towards them, and there's like just no middle ground there. And so that's why both of them are core value. The children are greatly valued because they provide money for the family, and also as the adults get older, then the children can provide financial security for them. And then, as mentioned before, respect of men is also like highly valued in their culture.
How's it going? So I'm going to be talking about things such as like the type of government, the healthcare and educational system, some of just like the social norms and things that they like from our culture, and then just an overview of the dominant religion. So the type of government is a federal republic, so it's somewhat ran like a democracy, but after doing a little study and seeing, it's kind of more communistic almost. It's whereas whenever it comes to voting for who the next leader is going to be, the public is kind of told who to vote for. Even though it's run like a democracy, they don't really have freedom to vote for whoever they would like. The healthcare system, hospitals are unsanitary and overcrowded. You do have to pay for medical care, and so a lot of people put off going to the hospitals because they can't afford it. When I checked in northern Sudan, there's about 3 doctors for every 10,000 people. So obviously there's not enough there's not enough people to meet the need. And so moving on to the education systems, they're actually not that bad. They're free from kids who start when they're young and go all the way through high school, even though it's not really the same as how we do it. There are 19 universities, but when they did a poll in 2009 of northern Sudan, from the ages that a typical kid would go to college, there would be 18 to 24. Only 22% of that population was literate. And so the education system is obviously not where they would want it to be, but in the past few years they have taken strides and spent more money on education systems and transportation to the schools and things like that. Some of the sports heroes, most of them are basketball players. There is Martin Bull, Lil Ding, and Thon Maker. Lil Ding was the only one who ever actually played in the NBA. The rest of them just were local heroes, things like that. Some of the political leaders that have been looked highly upon for helping out the poor in northern Sudan would be Omar al-Bashir and Ghaffar Nimarini, and so things like that. Some of the movies that I looked up, I couldn't find movies that they actually enjoyed. They do enjoy the genre of action films because there's not a lot of dialogue and things like that. Action is universally loved. They do really enjoy the show Friends, and based off what they see on Friends is what they think of Christians, because they assume that the people on Friends are Christians. And so Jamie said that it was kind of hard to break that social barrier of no, this is not how Christians behave, and this is not what we believe, things like that. There's also a movie about young men in Sudan called The Good Lie, and it's about a group of boys in Sudan who are adopted and come to live in America, and just about their life and how everything plays out. So that was pretty cool. The last thing is the dominant religion, obviously, as John talked about earlier, is Islam, the Sunni Muslims. When a poll was taken, about 2/3 of the population was Islam, and so it's definitely dominant there. The other two are kind of split up between Judaism and modern Christianity and things like that.
So we want to talk about our interview a little more. It was very interesting, and we learned a lot about the Sunnis people through our interview with Jamie. So one thing that we learned was that the people there, we asked him, did they care that you were sharing the gospel? Were they mad? How did that go over? And he said, technically they weren't really supposed to advertise that they were missionaries. That was kind of looked at as a bad word to say, and they wanted to be really careful with that. But he said that if they saw that you were from America, they either basically assumed you were either with the government or with the church. And he said they preferred the church. They didn't like the government. So they really didn't mind, and the only thing they really cared about is if you were forcing a conversion. So unless you were forcing a conversion, which obviously they weren't, then they were fine with you sharing the gospel with people.
Just some of the things that we asked him were did you ever feel unsafe, or were you ever worried about being over there? Because I feel like as Americans we get this kind of weird view of the Middle East, but he said he felt safe most of the time. There were a couple times where he got mugged. He actually got mugged 3 times, and he got his phone taken once, but those times he kind of blamed himself because he was in the wrong part of town at the wrong time. It's the same thing that could happen in a bad part of New York. Also, just one of the things they told us that was kind of funny is when you make friends over there, to listen to your friends and to follow your friends. He was following a friend down in the marketplace, and the friend asked to hold his hand to kind of get him through the marketplace, and Jamie refused. This was his first time to have to deal with, male hand-holding. So Ali Salman runs across the road, and Jamie goes to follow him, and he just gets smoked by a bus. He ended up being okay. He did go to the hospital, but he was fine. But just listen to your friends so that you don't get hit by a bus.
For about the first 6 months that he was there, he said he had a real hard time learning the language. That was the main thing that he would focus on. He would go to class, and the main people he would talk to were college students who spoke English, just so that he could get acclimated to the language and practice it before he actually went into the deeper parts of the city and having to know it fluently.
So for entertainment, they did 4 basic things. One was picking grass, which would mean they would just go out and like pick grass and play soccer with each other. They liked musical festivals, or music festivals, they would go to those. And then they also liked carnivals, they would go to carnivals often. And then the last thing is they would go swimming in the Nile with each other. And like that was just a fun thing to do, to swim in the Nile. So.
And that was the conclusion of our interview with Jamie. Dr. Franklin, we hope you give us an A.
Ladies and gentlemen, over and out.
Keep that.
Everyone was supposed to do it.